Good morning. It's good to have all of you here with us today. It's good to have you for our Bible class. It's time for us to begin. We are in the book of Revelation this morning, and we've been studying through the book of Revelation for some time. We're in Revelation chapter 21 this morning, and we started on this. We started on this last week and got into talking about new heavens and new earth, and hadn't finished that part of it. But here in chapter 21, we're coming to the description that John's going to give us of what heaven's going to be like. We've seen through the book of Revelation that the word of God has gone out, and the persecution that has followed because of that, the persecution that those first century saints had to face because of what Rome was doing to them. And those things were going to get worse. And so this is written to those first century Christians to give them hope, to understand that the Roman Empire is not going to be successful in conquering them, but they are going to be the ones that are going to end up conquering the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is going to fall. That God's the one who's going to be victorious, and He is going to make judgment upon them. We saw that in chapter 12 that we get to start to see the spiritual battle that's taking place behind the scenes as the Christians are being persecuted on earth by Rome. There's this spiritual battle that's taking place behind the scenes. And chapter 12 was sort of a summary of that. It's a summary of Satan's war with God, that his war with God has been going on for a long time. And he's tried to stop the Messiah from coming, tried to wipe out the seed line, if you will, to stop Jesus from coming. That didn't work. Tried to stop him when he was a baby, right? It talks about the dragon being there waiting for the woman to give birth and to devour the child as soon as it's born. He tried to have Jesus killed when he was about 2 years old, when Herod killed all the babies. He doesn't. He's not successful in that. He makes war in heaven, and he's not successful in that. He gets kicked out of heaven down to earth, and to make war with us, those that have the testimony of Jesus Christ. He's come down here to make war with us, and in his war with Christians, he's going to go after the church as a whole in the first century. He's going to go after the church as a whole in the first, second century, especially when Domitian comes to reign. Domitian's going to rule Rome from about 81 to I think 96 AD. And Domitian is the one that they really need to be watching out for. And so Satan recruits these three allies to go after the church. He recruits the beast from the sea, he recruits the beast from the earth, and he recruits the harlot. So he recruits these three allies to go after the church as a whole. The beast from the sea represents Roman's civil governmental authority. And when you see the picture of what the beast looks like, it's the same vision, if you will, that Daniel had in Daniel chapter 7 when talking about world powers and world governments, starting with the kingdom of Babylon, and then the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans who were to come after them. And so you see that symbolism that is there that represents governmental power. The beast from the earth promotes the worship of the first beast, and the harlot represents all of the decadence, all of the moral decadence of Rome that would have been maybe appealing to folks from a sensual perspective to go ahead and live that sort of lifestyle. But these are things that are making war against the Christians and making war against the church. Well, they're not going to be successful, right? The harlot falls. We read about that in chapter 17 and 18, about how the harlot falls. And when you think about the fall of an empire, its wealth and its decadence are going to be the first thing that are going to go away. And that's what happens with Rome, is that they lose that wealth and that decadence first as they are crumbling, as they are falling apart. And then you've got the fall of the beast, and they're thrown into the lake that burns with fire and brimstone in chapter 19. In chapter 20, then we have what befalls Satan. Satan has recruited these three allies to go after the church. As a whole, it hasn't worked. They're not going to be successful. God's going to be successful. His people are going to be victorious. That's the message of the book. Don't lose that in all of the minutia of all of the symbolism that's in here, because it's written in apocalyptic language. But it talks about what's going to befall Satan, and there's going to be a judgment that's going to come. And notice in verse 10, the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they'll be tormented day and night forever. So he's going to be defeated. He's going to ultimately be defeated. Now, there's a judgment day that's coming. And when judgment day comes, Satan's going to be thrown to that lake of fire. That's going to be the end of him, as far as him tormenting us, because we're going to go on to heaven, right? There's going to be that separation there. There's going to be that judgment scene, which we see there in chapter 20. And after the judgment scene, what's next? Well, it's heaven. And John's going to try to describe this in human language. He's going to try to describe this in physical language. But it's a difficult thing to describe to us because we're physical beings living in a physical world, and we're talking about a spiritual place in heaven. And so he's going to use the best language that he can to describe this to us. And here in chapter 21, verses 1 through 4, it says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, no sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." We started getting into this new heaven and new earth last week because people have a lot of different ideas about what this new heaven and this new earth is. Some folks take the position that there's going to be this physical paradise, that the earth is going to become a physical paradise, that it's going to be discovered rather than destroyed. And when it's discovered, it's going to become this paradise and we're going to be there. There's a thought that there's going to be a new physical earth and heavens, talking about the universe, right? When he's talking about there's a new heaven and a new earth for the old ones are gone, it's not talking about the dwelling place of God with regards to heaven. Right? In the Jewish mind, there are three heavens. There's the heaven where the birds fly, there's the heavens where the stars and the planets are, and then there's the heaven where God lives, the third heaven. And so when he's talking about this new heavens and new earth, he's not talking about that there's going to be some destruction of where God dwells, but he's talking about the destruction of the universe, right? He's talking about the end of time and the end of this earth and the end of the planets and the stars, all of that, right? That's going to go away. And so in this new heaven and new earth, some folks see this physical place like we have now, but without the corruption, sort of like in the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were there and they were with God and they were in a physical place. And so people have that sort of picture that we're going to go back to that sort of garden type paradise. God and man were together there in the garden, right? There wasn't any separation. And really, when we think about what heaven's going to be like, there's not going to be any separation anymore between us and God. We're going to be there with him. We're going to dwell together. Others say it's not a physical earth, but it's in reference that's being used here figuratively to talk about a spiritual place that we're going to be, and heaven is a new dwelling place, a new heavens and a new earth, a new place for us to dwell. And so they've got an idea of it being a spiritual place. And so we want to see, okay, well, what is going on here? How is he using this term? What's he getting after with new heavens and new earth? So we looked at other places where this phrase is used. And last week we looked in Isaiah. We looked in Isaiah chapter 65, verses 16 through 19. We looked in Isaiah chapter 66, verses 21 through 23. And there, Isaiah is describing to them what's going to happen when they come out of Babylonian captivity. The Israelites, those that were in the southern kingdom of Judah, had practiced idolatry, and they had gotten to a point where they were corrupt, and God was going to punish them for 70 years, and he's going to take them off into Babylonian captivity. And you might say, well, their world sort of came to an end at that point, right? The temple's destroyed, Jerusalem is destroyed, they're dragged off. It looks like Israel is dead and buried at that point. But that's not the case. He's going to allow them to come back. He's going to allow a remnant of them to come back. In 70 years, he's going to allow them to be restored to Israel. They're going to be restored to Jerusalem. They're going to rebuild the wall. They're going to rebuild the temple. And he uses this phrase in Isaiah symbolically when he talks about there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth. Basically, it's going to be a brand new world for them. Because certainly those people that have been in captivity for 70 years, some of them were maybe born in Babylon, right? They had never seen Israel before. They'd never seen the temple before. And so it's going to be new to them. And so Isaiah, we see, is using that phrase symbolically to talk about them reestablishing the Sabbath observances and reestablishing their temple worship. And so not in essence talking about, okay, the planet's going to be destroyed and we're going to have a new planet, right? So not talking about that physical thing, but using it more in a symbolic sense there in Isaiah. So we see the phrase that's used also in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 13. It says, "Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells." And so we've got a passage here in Peter, which is after the restoration of the Jews, right, which is after Jesus has come, after that has taken place. So he's not talking about the same thing. Peter's not talking about the same thing that Isaiah was talking about. Isaiah is talking about the restoration of Judaism, right? The restoration of their sacrificial system, the restoration of the temple. Peter's obviously not talking about that because that's already happened. He says we look forward to this, Peter does, right? That we're looking forward to this. So he's not talking about the same thing as Isaiah because it's something that we look forward to in New Testament times. We're looking forward to this new dwelling place in which righteousness dwells. Well, where's that going to be? Where righteousness is going to dwell with us. Who is it that's righteous? God is, right? God is. So where righteousness dwells. So we're going to be where righteousness dwells. We're going to be with him. So looking forward to a new dwelling place. Now, is that a physical place? There are some in our of our brethren who say, yeah, it's going to be a physical place. And if they're true, if they're right, then I'm going to go to their house in heaven and I'm going to watch their big screen TV. They've invited me already to come. So I've got that going for me. There are others who say, no, it's a spiritual place. But again, I want to ask, is this something that we should really argue about, like what heaven's going to be like, right? Or because we don't get a lot of clues, we get some physical description of what heaven's going to look like, but I don't think we really have so much evidence in the New Testament, especially. We don't have so much evidence of what heaven's exactly going to be like. And we know we're going to be with the Lord. We know we're going to worship him. We know we're going to sing with the angels. We know that there's plenty of room there, right? Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions or many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you in John chapter 14. And so we're gonna get to be with him. And so that's the important thing, is that we're going to be with him, right? Um, there's disagreement on whether the earth is going to be completely destroyed. Is it going to be completely gone? Or is it going to be purged? You think back to the time of the flood. And the waters came and they covered the earth, and the earth wasn't destroyed. All the flesh on the earth was destroyed if they weren't in the ark. But the earth itself wasn't destroyed, but it was purged from evil. And so some folks say, well, that's what's going to happen when this takes place at the end of time, is that everything that's on the earth is going to be burned up. You're going to have this purging fire, if you will, and then the earth is going to be a new earth. It's going to be a new place there for us to live. It's going to be renovated, is the idea. But just take a look at the context there in 2 Peter for a moment. Notice in 2 Peter chapter 3, in verse 7, it says, but the heavens and the earth, which are now preserved by the same word, are reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. There's a day coming where the earth is reserved for it, right? Just like we've got a reservation with judgment. There's a day that's reserved for the earth. It's reserved for what? It's reserved for fire, right? Right now, the earth is being preserved by the word of God. He holds all things together by his word, it says in Hebrews chapter 1. And so it's being held together by the word of God. But notice, skip down to verse 10. It says, the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. I was going to run into trouble using my tablet for this instead of my laptop. I failed to charge my laptop last night, so didn't have any power. So I got to flip back and forth on this tablet where I could have the two screens up. But he talks about it's going to be burned up, right? It's going to be destroyed there, right? That's the terminology that is used there when we look at that. The heavens are going to pass away, right? With great noise, it says. The heavens are going to pass away with great. That doesn't sound like they're going to be purged so much. It sounds like they're going to be destroyed, right? They're going to pass away with great noise. The elements are going to melt with fervent heat. Those elements, that word there that is used for elements is talking about primary things, right? The primary building blocks of life, the primary building blocks of this world and everything that's in it. They're going to melt with fervent heat. It sounds like they're going to be gone. right? It doesn't sound like they're just going to be purged. It sounds like they're going to be gone, completely destroyed, right? The very building blocks of physical things. The earth and the works in it will be burned up. It's going to be burned up. Not just going to be burned, not just going to be scorched, right? Going to be burned up. If you have a campfire going, right, and you throw a log in the campfire, and that log is burned up, how much of that log is left for you to use for something else? It's gone, right? It's been so burned up gives us the idea that it's it's not just crispy, right? But it's done. It's over with, right? It's been consumed, if you will. In verse 12, there, Peter says the heavens will be dissolved. And again, you've got the melting of the elements there. Go back for a moment and look at Revelation chapter 21 and verse 11. That's not what I want. Revelation 20:11. Revelation 20:11. It says, "And I saw a great white throne and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was no place found for them." Right? The heaven and the earth fled away from God's face, right? And there was no place found for them. So are they left? Are they still there? There's no place found for them. It would seem to indicate to us that they are gone. The new heavens and the new earth emphasize to us and emphasize to those first century Christians that when this earth is gone, we're going to still have a dwelling place. Right? The earth's going to be destroyed. The heavens are going to be dissolved. Right? Everything's going to melt with fervent heat. But don't worry about us losing our living space now. Don't worry about us losing our the realm that we exist in, because there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth. Right? Again, giving comfort to us. We are not going to be disembodied souls. Right? Some folks think, well, maybe we're just going to be like spirits, right? We're just going to be disembodied souls, and we're just going to sort of be floating around. We're going to have some sort of body. We're going to have some sort of spiritual body. Come over to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. So a long passage that's here, but we're gonna skip down to verse 35. He has a question, or he anticipates. Paul is either answering a question that the Corinthians have, or he's anticipating a question that they might have from what it is that he's writing about. And in verse 35, he says, "Someone will say, 'How are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come?'" And so people are wondering, well, when we're raised from the dead, right? When that resurrection day takes place, when that judgment day takes place, and we're raised from the dead, what kind of body are we going to have? Skip down to verse 42. He talks about the resurrection of the dead. He says, "So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body, and there is a spiritual body." So he says, we've got this natural body, we've got this physical body. It's what we have now. It's corrupt, right? Because it grows old, it gets weak, it gets diseases, it dies, right? But it's going to be raised in incorruption. So our spiritual body is going to be incorrupt. It's not going to suffer from those things. Not going to suffer from age, right? Not going to suffer from pain, not going to suffer from disease. None of those things. That we're going to have a spiritual, but we're going to have some sort of spiritual body. Now he talks about us being raised, right? Having a bodily resurrection, that our bodies are going to be resurrected. And then in an instant, right? In the blinking of an eye, we're going to be transformed. We're going to be changed into that spiritual body, because he's going to take us to heaven. Right? That's what the scriptures teach us, is that we're going to go to heaven. And what cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven? Flesh and blood, right? So we're not going to be in these sort of same physical bodies that we're in. We're going to be in a spiritual body. Now, what's that going to look like? First John chapter 3, I think, talks about when he returns, we will see him as he is, and we will be like him. We haven't seen that yet, so we don't know. I can't tell you what it looks like, because I don't have a description of it yet. We haven't gotten there yet. Also, come over and take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4. With regards to our spiritual bodies. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and we're going to read verse 16 through chapter 5, verse 4 here. Paul says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal, in the heavens. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed with our habitation which is from heaven, if indeed having been clothed we shall not be found naked. For we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality may be swallowed up by life." What's he talking about here? He's talking about our physical bodies. That our physical body is like a tent that we dwell in. This outward man is perishing. This tent that we live in, right? It's decaying, it's dying, but we're going to have another building, right? We're going to have another tent to go to. We're going to have another place to go to, which is not made with hands, right? Eternal in the heavens. So there's a spiritual body that is there, that we want to be clothed with that spiritual body, and we won't have to deal with any of these things anymore that are here. So if we're going to have a spiritual body, we're not just going to be floating around. We need some sort of place to be, right? This world was made for us as physical beings to exist on. It's a perfect place for us to exist on, right? And so we're going to need some sort of dwelling place for that spiritual body. Now, whether that's a physical place or whether that's a spiritual place, don't miss the point. We're going to leave here. We're going to leave this planet. We're going to leave this world behind, and we're going to go on to someplace better, right? We're going to dwell with the Lord forever. We're not going to be here on this earth, but we're going to be someplace else, right? Some other places where we see verbiage that suggests that it's another place, that it's a different place, that we're not talking about a renovated earth. Look at Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. He says, there in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal." Don't lay up your treasures here on earth. Lay your treasures up in heaven, which sounds like it's a different place than earth, right? It's another place, not here, but someplace else that we are to lay up our treasures. Matthew chapter 19 and verse 21. He says again that you are to put your treasures in heaven, to have your treasures in heaven. Where your treasure is, there your heart's going to be also, right? So he's talking about putting our treasures somewhere else. Look over at Luke chapter 12 and verse 33. He says, "Sell what you have, give alms, provide yourselves money bags which do not grow old, a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches nor moth destroys." Right? You lay up your treasures here, somebody might break in and steal it. You lay up your treasures here, if they're garments, moths may come in and eat those things up and destroy them. But if you put your treasures in heaven, well, there aren't going to be any thieves there. There aren't going to be any moths there. Your treasure isn't going to be destroyed. It's going to be there waiting for you. Lay up treasures in heaven. Notice one more passage with regards to this in 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Peter says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you." Where is that treasure reserved for you? Heaven. Where's that inheritance? It's in heaven. Where is it kept on guard by God? It's in heaven, right, where he dwells. And so it would seem that our treasures are laid up somewhere else. So there's another place that we're going to, right? A new heavens and a new earth, a new dwelling place. And so it appears that this is being used here to talk about that new place, to talk about, don't worry about the earth being burned up and destroyed. Don't worry about all these things being gone. You focus on heaven because there, if you put your treasures there, that's where you're going to be with God, right? Comments or questions? I've been doing a lot of talking. Comments or questions on any of these things? So he says, and there and again in verse 21 or chapter 21, verse 1, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. He says, also there was no more sea. It's going to be a different place, right? Going to be a different place. It says there's going to be no more sea. Now, in a sense, the sea separates us, doesn't it? It separates us from peoples in other places. And so the sea is sort of a separation, right? Well, when we get to heaven, when we get to this new heavens and this new earth, when we get to this new dwelling place, there isn't going to be any sea. Well, what is it? There's not going to be any separation. Isn't going to be any separation between us and our loved ones anymore. Isn't going to be any separation between us and God anymore, right? No separation either. Not separated by death, not separated by the sea. In the earlier pictures that we have of heaven, when we look at God's throne room in Revelation chapter 4 and Revelation chapter 5, as John is describing that, what is it that appears before the throne? It's made of crystal, right? And how does he refer to that? As a crystal sea, right? There's a crystal sea there before the throne. Sort of this separation maybe that exists between us and God. The God is there in heaven and we are here on earth, and there's a separation between us. Now we want to be reconciled to him, right? We want to be with him and he will be with us. But there's this sort of physical separation, if you will. In the new heaven and the new earth, there's no separation. There's no more of that sea. Heaven and earth is now going to be one place, right? Because God's going to be there with us. He's going to dwell with us and we're going to be his people. And so there's no longer going to be separate places. We're going to all be in one place, right? We'll be with God, and we'll be where he is. The sea is also a place of tumult, if you will. When you think about dangers, right? If you want to go to Europe and you don't want to fly, and you're going to get on a boat and you're going to go across the Atlantic Ocean, right? There's a trust factor with that boat. You have to have faith in that ship that's going to carry you across, because that's a dangerous place to be, right? To come across the sea. But we see the sea as a source of tumult. There's waves, right? People can be carried about by every wave of doctrine that Jesus warns against. He says, don't be carried away, right? Paul warns against, don't be carried away by every wave of doctrine. Don't go along like the sea, right? By being blown about by the things of this life, but to be steadfast, right? And so you've got that sort of area of tumult there that the sea sort of represents. Also, the first beast that Satan recruits to go after the church as a whole, where does that beast come out of? Comes out of the sea, right? Comes out of the sea. And so in the book of Revelation, when we see the sea and the beast that comes out of the sea is sort of representative of an evil place. What else isn't there going to be in heaven? Isn't going to be any evil, right? All that's going to be gone. All that's going to be done away with. And so the idea that there's no more sea, I think, is representative again of what he's talking about here, that there's not going to be any separation and there isn't going to be any evil. Verse 2, he says, Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. This New Jerusalem coming down, some folks look at this and they say, well, this is talking about the church, that this is the church coming down from heaven. But it doesn't appear that that's the case, that he's talking about the church, because he's talking about something that's going to take place after the judgment, right? After the judgment scene, after we all appear before God's throne and we all are judged, and the wicked are cast into the lake of fire, and the righteous are going to go to heaven. Well, would it be now that the church is coming down to earth from heaven? That wouldn't make any sense, right? As far as chronology goes. And so what are we looking at with this New Jerusalem that's coming? Well, he's talking about heaven again, right? It's a heavenly place. It's a new dwelling place that is being revealed, right? That is coming down from heaven. Not that it's coming down to earth and resting someplace, because the earth is gone. It's been burned up. It's been destroyed. It's passed away, right? It's the idea that it's coming from heaven, that this new dwelling place is coming from God himself. And so he sees this coming down. This is in reference to heaven. They were looking forward to that city in the book of Hebrews. Those heroes that were there in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11, they were looking for a better place. They were looking for a holy city. They were looking for a city that was made without hands. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 10, talking about Abraham there, it says that he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. It talks about them looking for that heavenly home, right? That why were they able to endure the persecutions that they endured? Why were they able to endure the things that they did? Because they were looking forward to something better. They were looking forward to that heavenly city, right? And so it's referred to as the city there. It's referred to as Jerusalem there in Hebrews chapter 11. It's referred to using those same terms. In Galatians chapter 4, Paul talks about us being here on earth and the fact of heaven, right? The realm of heaven. And he talks about the Jerusalem that is here versus the Jerusalem that is there. And he uses Hagar and Sarah as descriptions of this. He says Hagar, right, is representative of the physical, what is here, but Sarah is representative of that which is in heaven, that which is above. And in verse 26 of Galatians 4, Paul says, the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. And so he's talking about a heavenly place there. So he's talking about earth and he's talking about heaven. And he's using Jerusalem there in what it is that he's talking about. And so when we see this, he's not talking about this city, New Jerusalem, coming down out and being a place that's here on earth. He's going to give a description here shortly in chapter 21. If you look down to verse 16 of Revelation 21, talking about this city that he sees coming down out of heaven, it says, the city is laid out as a square. Its length is as great as its breadth, and he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. Its length, breadth, and height are equal. So he's describing here the city. He's describing what it looks like, and he says, well, so if you want to take this to be literal, right? If you're going to take it to be literal and you're saying, well, no, this is New Jerusalem, this is talking about some sort of paradise that's going to take place on earth, where God's going to maybe rule from the city of Jerusalem. He gives the dimensions here. So if you're going to take it literally, then you have to take the dimensions literally. 12,000, or is it 12,000 furlongs? 1,200? 12,000 furlongs. 12,000 furlongs is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 miles. And so he's saying in his description of the city is 1,400 miles wide by 1,400 miles deep by 1,400 miles tall. It's a cube, right? Same dimensions, all three, height, width, and depth. The whole land of Palestine is 150 miles by 70. You're not fitting that in there, right? 1,400 miles by 1,400 miles. 1,400 miles tall, if it were on the earth, you wouldn't have any air to breathe. You'd be looking down at the satellites that are orbiting Earth. So it's not meant to be taken literally when we talk about this. It's talking about a place where there's no lack of area, right? There's no lack of space. When Jesus was born, there was no room for them at the inn, right? But when we die and we go to heaven, my Father's house, Jesus said, there's many rooms. There's plenty of space for all of us. And so again, you see the symbolic nature of him using this. And so this holy city, New Jerusalem, is just a reference there to heaven, that it comes from God, that is prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. That's the church, right? When we think about the church, but it's difficult here to separate the church, the people, from the place, which is heaven, because it's the church, it's the people that are going to be there in heaven, right? And so he says that this city, this place, has been prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And we've seen earlier in the book of Revelation that it talks about the marriage feast, that happy are we who are called to the marriage feast, that we're not going to have to go through the second death, that we're going to get to be with him forever, that we're going to be victorious. There's places where the saved are compared to the bride of Christ. In verse 9, it says, one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls filled with the seven last plagues came to me and talked to me, saying, come and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. Right? And so he's talking here about the saved that are going to be there in heaven. Here's what heaven's going to be like. Here's where the domain of the saved is going to be like. We see this comparison of the bride and Christians in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 2. Paul says, I am jealous for you with godly jealousy, for I betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you a chaste virgin to Christ. He wants the church there to be pure. He wants them to be holy. He wants them to be like that bride for the bridegroom, for Christ, that we are to be married, if you will, to him in the fact that we are in league with him, right? That we're in a covenant relationship with him. And certainly in Ephesians chapter 5, you see that imagery being used with regards to the husband-wife relationship to God and his people and God and his church. That is a similar, very similar relationship there. Any comments or questions through verse 2? Yes, Morgan.
I know it's kind of the nature of the entire book, just the finality of Revelation. In verse 1, especially when it said that, the sea wouldn't separate them anymore. If you go back to specifically of all those Genesis, in chapter 10, towards the end of that chapter, it's talking about the descendants and lineage of Noah. And it specifies that Eber had a son, and he was born. In verse 25 of chapter 10, for in his days the earth was divided. And then you go to chapter 11, and the whole beginning of that book is about everyone coming back together, and that's not what God wanted. He specifically said multiple times at the beginning of that book to spread and multiply. And that was one of the main reasons of the destruction of the Tower of Babel was for everyone to spread out.
Yeah.
To go forward and populate. And it's, like I said, it just kind of builds on that finality of Revelation in that verse.
Yeah. It's like everything here on earth, right? From the sin in the garden was a division, a separation from man of God, a separation of men with men, right? Different languages, different races, different continents. And it's like all that's going to come back to the way that it was in the beginning, right? When we get to the end. So like we've come full circle. Any other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
It's, John is trying to explain a realm that we don't understand. So the only thing that you can use to even connect to it is to use things that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Streets of gold. Why would a streets of light need streets of gold? It's not going to be physical light. It's just something we relate to. Show beauty to show. It's like trying to explain the internet, but
Yeah.
How do we relate? The only thing to explain to us things that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Therefore, like we're talking about big box.
Yeah.
Dwelling places, rooms. I mean, that's what we're relating.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole purpose of it is for us to get the message that we're going to be with God, right? And that we're going to dwell with God forever. And so what is that going to look like? Well, it doesn't really matter. Right? It doesn't really matter. If it's a physical place, fine. If it's a spiritual place, fine. We're just be happy to be there with God, right? To be.
God meeting the angel.
Yeah. 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 No, last week I used an illustration that if you were describing like a Ford F-150 to somebody that lived in 1000 AD, right? It's like a chariot, right? It's got four wheels and it's pulled by 300 horses. And you're like, how do you hook up 300 horses to one chariot? People wouldn't be able to understand, but you'd have to use something, right? And that's what John's trying to do here. Is he's trying to use earthly human language to describe something that isn't earthly and that isn't human. Well, they're built on similar platforms, but yeah. In verse 3, he says, I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. He is going to dwell with us. We're going to be there with him. We're going to be in the same dwelling place. That dwelling, that tabernacle, right? That idea of tabernacling is the idea of dwelling together. The tabernacle of God is with men. And so with tabernacle, when he's talking about this tabernacle, right, he's not talking about a tent. He's not talking about a temporary place like they had in the Old Testament when they built the tabernacle, when Moses was given the pattern of the tabernacle, right? But this idea of the tabernacle of God is with men, his dwelling place, right? His dwelling place is going to be with us. We're all going to be together, is the emphasis that is there. That he's not going to be dwelling in heaven and we're going to be dwelling on earth, right? But we're going to be dwelling together. His tabernacle is going to be with us. His presence in Leviticus chapter 26 and verse 11. God says, I will set my tabernacle among you, and my soul will not abhor you. He was going to have his tabernacle there. He was going to have a dwelling place that was going to be with them in that most holy place, in the tabernacle that Moses and the children of Israel were to build. And then later in the temple, right? He was going to meet with them between the cherubim on the mercy seat in the most holy place, in the temple and in the tabernacle. That's where God was. And so they will be his people. This word in most manuscripts, or the better manuscripts, is plural. They will be his people. They will be his peoples, right? The redeemed from earth are going to be many nations. It isn't just Americans that are going to heaven, right? Going to be from many different nations, peoples. But we're all one in Christ. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 28, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free, there's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Doesn't mean that we don't have different roles as male and female, but we are all of equal value when it comes to being saved, when it comes to our souls, when it comes to salvation. There's no separation between us and other nationalities. And so John says himself that God will be with him. 3 times he says that in this particular verse, that God will be with them, right? Tabernacle of God is with men. He will dwell with them. They shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And so he's going to make his dwelling place with us. They were to make, in the Old Testament times, they were to make a temporary dwelling place for God. That's what that tabernacle was. It was patterned after the true dwelling place that is in heaven. When he tells Moses in Exodus chapter 25 and verse 40, see that you make all things according to the pattern that I have given to you. Right? There was a pattern that was given, and it was a pattern on what was in heaven, that mercy seat, right, where we can approach God and ask him for mercy and grace. Well, what is that mercy seat where they would approach God once? The high priest, right, would go in there once a year and offer the blood to make atonement on Atonement Day, on Yom Kippur. And now we have access to that all the time. We don't have a human high priest. We don't have a most holy place. We don't only get to go in there once a year. But according to Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 16, we can boldly come before God's throne and ask him for mercy and grace. That mercy seat that was there is representative of God's throne. That's where they came to meet with God. That's where we get to make that spiritual journey and go and meet with God and pray to him and ask him for what it is that we need. But in the future, once Judgment Day has taken place in the future, we won't have to make a spiritual journey to go before his throne and ask for grace and mercy. We will be there with him. And there won't be any more sin. There won't be any more evil. So we'll no longer have to ask him for grace. We'll already have it. It'll already be something that we own, something that we've received from him. If you look at Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8, as God has given them instructions for building that tabernacle, that idea of the dwelling place is there. In Exodus 25:8, it says, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Let them make me a sanctuary. Let them make me a holy place, a place that's been separated from common usage. A special place, right? And in that tabernacle, you had a holy place where the table of showbread was, and where the menorah was, and where the altar of incense was, and the priests would go in there and they would do their duties. But that was a holy place. It was separated from common usage, and not anybody could go in there. You had to be a priest in order to go in there, right? A sanctuary, a holy place. That is so he could dwell among them, right? Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. You've got the same words that are used here in the Hebrew when he talks about the holy place, that sanctuary, and the most holy place where God's going to dwell, that most holy place. And he's to make all things according to the pattern. In Hebrews, we see that these things that were made on earth were copies and shadows of the things that are in heaven. come over to Hebrews chapter 9 real quick before we close class. Hebrews chapter 9. Look at verses 1 through 5. It says, Then indeed, even the first covenant had ordinances of divine service and an earthly sanctuary. For a tabernacle was prepared, the first part in which was the lampstand, the table, and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And behind the second veil, the part of the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that had the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. He says we can't speak of these things in detail, but he does use this as an example to talk about these earthly things that were copies of what is in heaven. Skip down to verse 23 in Hebrews 9. It says, Therefore it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So he talks about the things that were on earth were a copy of what is true. It's a copy of what it was that was in heaven. And what's better, the original or the copy? Original is always going to be better than the copy, right? Copies degrade as you make copies, but the original is always going to be better. Notice in Hebrews 10:1, the law, having a shadow of the good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. Right? There is a shadow. What is it that makes the shadow? The real thing, right? Can a shadow do damage? Can you be injured if you're shadow boxing? Can your shadow reach out and slap you? Exodus, he tells them to build it. Hebrews, he says it's like what's in heaven is patterned after what is in heaven. And in the book of Revelation, we see these things being referred to again as God's dwelling place, that he's going to dwell with us. And so in this Sunday morning class, we have studied Exodus and Hebrews and now Revelation. So you see, there is a method to my madness. And I've gone 2 minutes over, and I apologize for that. But any last minute comments, questions, or snide remarks before we break for worship?
Just as you were talking, one thing that I was just processing through, like new heavens, new earth, new bodies, and then God dwelling with us, like in all of that, it's just like question came to my mind of like, who's he doing that for? And it's like it's for us, and like how beautiful is his love for us? Because it's not like he's doing it for the most righteous people in the whole universe or for perfect people, but he's doing it for us who were sinners when he loved us first, when he died for us. And it's
Right.
like his love and just he's doing all this because he loves us so much and wants to be with us. That's just so beautiful to like see that beneath everything he's doing.
Yeah.
Like his plan because he wants to be with us,
Yeah. Yeah. All of the things that he's done is because he loves us and he wants to be with us. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your attention and your comments.